Hello and welcome to another Toolbooks tutorial. My name is Samuel Burmeister and I'm the owner here at Toolbooks. Today is part 3 of Xero Payroll and our Xero Payroll series, and today I'm going to take you through processing payroll in Xero. If you watched the first 2 videos, apologies for the delay, but it's finally here and I'm going to take you through everything you need to know here to process that payroll for your employees or for someone else's employees. Disclaimer, as usual, I am a registered BAS agent who processes payroll all the time. However, every business has unique circumstances. So please refer to the ATO guidance and Fair Work guidance for anything particular. You can also give them a ring. Otherwise, speak with your advisor, such as your accountant, HR specialist, or bookkeeper for more information. If you'd like assistance on setting up payroll or processing payroll in Xero, you can always reach out to us here at Toolbooks. So let's get started. Today I'm going to continue using the demo company environment in Xero for confidentiality and just to show you how it might look on your side. If you haven't already watched episodes 1 and 2 of this series, please go back and do that first, as you need to have the setup correct and the employee information in Xero correctly before this final step. Otherwise, trying to cut corners, you'll just end up making errors in the payroll. So before you start the pay run, there are a few preparation steps. The first thing is ensuring that your employee's setup is completed fully, like I mentioned. Secondly, if you have any casual employees or timesheeted employees, you want to make sure that you've approved them. So if you go to the payroll menu, and you go down to your timesheets, this is where you'll be able to view any pending timesheets. So you can see here in the demo file, there's examples of what they might look like. Once they have been added to a pay run and processed, the status will change to processed. Now, the employee submits the timesheet via the Xero app, which you can invite them to, and I took you through that process in the last video. And all you would be doing here is ticking and approving them after reviewing the individual timesheets. If you have external software, you can also publish those timesheets at this stage before processing the pay run. The next step is to review any leave. So before you jump into the pay run, it's a good practice to review any leave requests. So go to payroll, leave, and in this section here, you'll view any leave requests that have been lodged either by the employees or someone in the business. So in the demo file, we can see under current to review, we've got some upcoming leave, none of which applies to the current pay period in June. However, it gives you an example. So we can see here, Oliver has applied for annual leave for the 24th of July. If I click into that, Oliver has just requested 1 day, 7.6 hours. So I have the option here to approve it or reject it with a note or update it as required. It will also show me how much leave they have, so I can determine whether I want to approve this or talk with the employee first. Anything in the upcoming section has already been approved, and it should be in denominations of 7.6 hours, which is the standard day. So now that we've approved and reviewed any leave, we're ready to start processing our pay run. So you go back to the payroll menu and select pay employees. Pay employees is where you'll spend most of your time when actually processing the pay runs. Everything else is to do with the settings or setup of your employees. So now that you're in payroll, pay employees, the next step is to click on Add Pay Run and select a pay period. Now, some businesses may have multiple pay periods. For example, weekly, fortnightly, monthly, etc. You can set up those pay periods in the payroll settings section of Xero, and that has been covered in a previous video. So please make sure if what you need is not showing here, we've got fortnightly and weekly, then what that means is you need to go into the settings and set up a new calendar to reflect the frequency of how often you'd like to pay your employees. So for today's exercise, we're going to use a weekly calendar. So we're just paying the employees up to the 21st of June. So once I've selected my pay period, I click Next. And what you'll see is a draft pay run is now created. So this draft pay run has been generated based on the week we selected. And if I go back to pay employees, I'll now see under draft pay runs, my weekly calendar ready for review. So let's have a look here firstly at an overview. So we're inside the weekly pay run we've just raised. What you'll have firstly is a list of all employees that are included in this payroll calendar. If there's anyone that shouldn't be here showing, or someone is missing from this list, you need to go into the employees section and make sure that you have assigned the correct calendar to that employee. Otherwise, they will not show up. Another common issue could be the start date. If the start date doesn't relate to this pay period, make sure that it's correct as well. Along the top of the draft pay run, you'll see a summary of information based on the defaults that is appearing here. So we've got gross earnings of 4035, taxes withheld or PAYG of 854, superannuation of 20115. This only reflects the employer obligation. So if they've got any salary sacrifice, etc., that doesn't go here. Then net pay, what amount the employees will receive in their bank accounts and what will actually come out of the employer's bank account. We've got the status, so it's in draft status, and the payment dates. Now, the payment date is important as this is the date that you will report the payroll figures in your financial reports, and it's the date the ATO believes you will or have paid employees. Another important fact about the payment date is ABA files. So if you wish to pay your employees via a batch file, an ABA file, a bank file, all the same thing, then you will need to set the payment date to today's date or a future date. If you download a prior dated ABA file to upload to your bank, it will be rejected. So make sure that this date reflects when you'd like to pay the employees. Okay, so next step is reviewing each employee's payslip. So all you need to do is click into the employee's name. So anywhere along this line, I'm going to click on Odette first. The information that then displays in this payslip is dependent on their initial setup. So if anything looks wrong here, take notes and then go and review their pay template and their tax settings in the employee section. If you're unsure about this, you can go back and review the previous videos in this series that I've made. So the first section you'll have here is their earnings. The earnings show their ordinary hours or salary, and this earnings line covers the standard pay of an employee, plus any additional earnings that you may wish to pay them. So because this is the demo file, it's added quite a few things. But in a typical employee's payslip, it would look something like this. So maybe Odette's standard pay is 35 hours a week at $21 an hour. So when I run the draft, that's what will display for me. If Odette, for example, worked any extra hours, needs to be paid anything additional to the ordinary hours, I can click Add Earnings Line, and from this list, I can select what I would like to add. So for example, let's say that Odette worked 35 hours and then worked another 2 hours overtime. I can click on Add Earnings Line, drop down the earnings rate and select overtime. And then you can see it's already paying at 1.5 times. And I can add in my 2 hours that Odette is meant to earn here. Now, it's very easy to add new items here. If the item that you desire is missing from this list, all you need to do is go into the payroll settings under pay items and then add the item that's missing or that you would like. And then when you return here, you'll have it showing in your earnings rate list. Okay, cool. So this is also where any approved timesheets will show. So if Odette had a timesheet that we'd approved, we would have a little icon that looks like a link sitting here next to the hours that would tell me these hours have been generated from an approved timesheet. If I need to edit anything here, let's say Odette didn't work 35 hours as we usually would, I can just simply override that figure. But ideally, unless they're casual, you leave their template set up correctly so that it's ready to go each pay. Moving on to deductions. These are not as common in a lot of pay runs. However, it's still important to understand what we use this for. If you need to add a deduction other than salary sacrifice super, this is where you do it. So you'd click add deduction, select the type of deduction, pre-tax, post-tax, for example, and then you can choose the calculation type. Is it a pre-tax percentage, post-tax percentage, or is it a fixed amount deduction? Once you add it, you can put in the amount of the deduction. Once again, if it's a regular recurring deduction, instead of adding it every time here, you should set it up in their pay template, and that way you don't need to add it each time. Moving on to tax. So thankfully, Xero uses the ATO tax tables, or if you're in another country, whatever tax tables are in your region. These tax tables are updated automatically for you based on the information provided by the the government organization. In our case, the ATO would provide the tax tables to Xero. Now, what will happen is based on how Odette was set up in her tax tab, which would reflect the tax file declaration form, this will automatically generate an amount of tax payable. What Xero is doing is saying, based on $798 of earnings in this week, I'm going to look at the tax table for weekly earnings and withhold X amount of PAYG from this employee's pay run. Now you can see here, Odette's has PAYG with the tax-free threshold selected and no leave loading is applicable. If that was incorrect, let's say Odette shouldn't have the tax-free threshold, you would need to go back to Odette's settings in the tax tab and update that first, then come back to the pay run. Normally with tax, unless there's some kind of special situation or a mistake, you can leave it as is. Just make sure the tax tab is reflecting the tax file declaration form. Next up, we have superannuation. So Xero will automatically add a super line as long as you've put this in the pay template. If this is missing, make sure you go back to their pay template and add the standard statutory rate of superannuation guarantee, which at the moment is 11%. So this is a demo file. It's obviously pulling in some old percent. So I'm going to remove it and replace it with the standard 11%. In a normal pay run, as long as you've got that item added in the pay template, it would take 11% of the ordinary pay and put that amount in here for us. For this one here, I wonder if it's going to let us do it or not. So I'm just going to put in a dummy amount for the sake here, but usually this automates at the current rate. Don't set it up with a set rate, just choose the statutory rate because that will automatically update each year to reflect the current ATO rates of super. So at the recording of this video, 14th of June, it's 11%. As of the 1st of July this year, it's moving to 11.5%. So to avoid errors, just let Xero set the rate for you. Next we have, one more thing on the super line. That's the statutory rate. If you wanted to add a special type of super payment, for example, if an employee wanted to salary sacrifice into super, you can click add super line And then under contribution type, you can select what type of super payment you would like to add. So the most common that you'll see is a pre-tax voluntary contribution. This is where an employee has asked you to salary sacrifice a fixed amount or a percentage of their earnings into their super fund as a pre-tax contribution. Salary sacrifice into super. So in this case, we're going to assume that Odette wants to make a pre-tax contribution for $100. So I'll choose fixed amount. When I click OK, it adds in the amount for me, and I can then decide how much super to put in there. If I want that to be a percentage, I simply change the calculation type, and I can tell Xero what percentage the salary sacrifice should be based on the earnings, and it will do that for me as well. Cool. There's other super types there too. If you're unsure, please speak with your advisor, as super can get very technical and it's not something you want to play around with. Reimbursements. Now, once again, this is not something that's super common, and best practice in Xero is to use the Xero expenses or accounts payable section for reimbursing. You can use a reimbursement line in the pay run. The only issue is it often posts this pay run item to a random area on your balance sheets, which is not ideal. So if you do want to add a reimbursement, once again, it's based on the items that are available in the settings. If you don't have the reimbursement type here that you want, add it in settings, then come back here. We're going to say maybe it was a travel cost for fuel. I can see that it's been linked to my travel account, which is good. And I'm reimbursing the employee's receipt they provided me. Let's put a high amount because petrol these days. Odette has spent $105.68. Now this is a reimbursement, and based on the type, it doesn't affect anything else in the pay run. It's separate. So you can see it's going to this account, and the other side of the transaction will be going to her bank account. It's not relevant to the calculations of super and things like that. It's just a reimbursement. Lastly, on the payslip, you'll see the net pay and any leave that the employee accrues. If this was a standard pay run in Xero, you should also have personal carers leave here, which would be about half the rate of the annual leave. So we're just going to put in a dummy figure. If they're casual, of course, you wouldn't have any leave showing here. So now I have completed the pay run. Now it's kicking up an error because of the statutory rate here. So I'm just going to try and change that back to the rate to see if it's happy for the demo purposes. Yeah, cool. So now that I've reviewed and added anything I needed to the pay run, Odette is sorted. I can then drop down the employee section here and go to my next employee and repeat the same process. Once I'm happy with the employees, I can either click close or the little hyperlink up the top left to get back to my summary screen. This is where you'll do your final review. So a few things that I would suggest here in your final review. Firstly, ensure that the total number of employees matches the amount that should be paid. If anyone's missing here, you need to investigate. Secondly, ensure that the payment date is accurate. Remember, this needs to be current or future dated if you plan on using a bank file or ABA file. Next, you can click Post Pay Run. Once you post the pay run, you can see that you need to pay your employees and you need to file the pay run to the ATO. So we're going to post it. What that means now is that Xero has been updated with these financials. So your financial reports now have added the wages expense, the tax is now sitting on the balance sheet payable, any super, any wages payable. At this stage here, what you can then do is email the pay slips out. So if you go under pay run options, email pay slips. This pops up a little window where you can either send them all or untick and send the relevant ones that you'd like to. The next thing you want to do is hit File. When you file STP, you report the payroll information to the ATO. So you can see you'll get a little authorization declaration form here saying, I understand what I'm reporting is correct and true, and you can then tick and submit to the ATO. At present, as of June 2024 in Australia, this is a requirement by the ATO, and you must lodge that single touch payroll filing on or before the payment date of the employees every pay. If it has any errors, make sure you've gone to payroll, single touch payroll, and set up for STP reporting, because that's really important. So now I've emailed my payslips, I've filed my STP. The last thing I need to do is actually pay my employees, of course. So don't get confused and assume that once you've processed the pay run, you've posted it, that the employees are paid. Xero does not pay your employees for you. It does the accounting side. You can now either download an ABA file if you want to batch pay with your bank, or you can manually transfer the net pay amounts using your online banking to the relevant employee. Make sure when the payments display on your banking screen that you code them to wages payable. And there you go. You've now processed your pay run and you've paid your employees, filed your STP, and emailed your payslips. As always, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you need any help, you can reach out to us directly. Thanks for watching.